How did a boy who grew up in poverty become one of the richest men in history? John Rockefeller's story begins with the intrigue and harsh life lessons he learned at a very early age. It was a life full of contradictions. On one side of the scale, an extraordinary work ethic; on the other, lessons in cunning from his father, who was called Devil Bill. John was born on July 8, 1839, in the small village of Richest, New York. The family lived poorly, but this did not prevent his father, William Rockefeller, from leading a colorful life. Devil Bill was known as a con man who had a knack for charming people. He sold counterfeit drugs and even disappeared for a while, leaving his family behind. John saw his father cheat people, but drew his own conclusion from it. Cheating is bad, but being able to understand people is invaluable. At the age of 6, John started writing down every dime he spent in a notebook. He knew that without control over money, you can't get very far. Every dollar earned or spent was a lesson to him. For example, when he helped his mother sell a turkey at the market, he was careful to make sure everything was counted to the cent. When he turned 16, John found his first job as an assistant bookkeeper. The pay was modest, only 50 cents a day, but the young man was happy. His expense records continued, and by this time, he had already saved his first $50. For a poor boy of that time, it was a fortune. John was not only thrifty, but also incredibly disciplined. He got up early, worked hard, and was always looking for opportunities to earn money. He never threw away promises and always kept his word, which set him apart from his father. In 1863, when John was only 24 years old, he first invested in the oil business. At that time, oil was just beginning to be used on a mass scale, and many considered it only a temporary fashion. But Rockefeller saw great potential in it. He opened his first oil refining company and immediately focused on cutting costs. The key to success was simple: the cheaper the extraction and refining, the more profit. Rockefeller negotiated the lowest possible rates with the railroads to transport oil. If the companies refused, he threatened to build his own railroads to deliver the oil himself. Once, this actually forced a major railroad company to cut rates by almost a third. Rockefeller had no tolerance for competition. To outmaneuver his rivals, he used an unusual method. He hired spies who extracted information about competitors' plans. For example, if another company was planning to open a new plant, John learned about it in advance and ahead of them. In addition, he bought shares of his competitors, often doing it through third parties, so that no one knew who was behind the purchase. In this way, he gradually gained control of their enterprises. As a result, by 1880, his company Standard Oil controlled more than 90% of all oil refining in the United States. But he had to pay dearly for this power. Success brings not only money, but also enemies. John Rockefeller, being the richest man of his time, perfectly understood this. He was not just a billionaire, but a man who lived in constant fear for his life. His wealth made him a target for competitors, detractors, and even ordinary people who envied his success. Rockefeller lived as if he expected an assassination attempt every day. His house was a fortress. There were secret exits, high fences, and round-the-clock security. Even friends and relatives had to go through strict control before they could get to him. He believed that only such measures could protect him from danger. All his life, he avoided public places. If he did appear in public, he was accompanied by a crowd of guards. But even this was not enough for Rockefeller. He hired lookalikes. These people looked like him and traveled the world under his name. This helped to confuse potential assassins who could follow the billionaire. Rockefeller was also very afraid of being poisoned. In his pocket, he always had a small first aid kit with a special antidote. It contained charcoal and other remedies that could neutralize the poison. It wasn't paranoia. Several times he was actually threatened with poisoning. For example, he had once received a threatening letter that hinted that there might be poison in his food. So John trusted only the people closest to him to prepare his food. But even at home, he checked every bite before he ate it. This fear sometimes drove him to the point of absurdity. It is said that he once refused a sumptuous dinner at a meeting with investors because he did not trust the local chefs. For Rockefeller, fear was not a weakness. It was a form of control. He believed that only those who are always prepared for the worst can survive and retain their wealth. And that was his secret. John did not rely on fate, but acted in advance. John Rockefeller spent about half of his fortune on good causes, but behind this generous gesture there were personal motives and strict control. He never gave money away for nothing. Every dollar had a purpose. At first glance, Rockefeller's philanthropy looked incredibly impressive. By the end of his life, he had donated about $500 million in terms of modern money. It's tens of billions. But he always dictated the terms, where exactly his money would go and what it would be spent on. For example, he founded the Rockefeller Foundation, which financed the construction of universities, hospitals, and scientific research. However, this was not done out of altruism alone. Each project was carefully calculated to not only benefit, but also to keep Rockefeller's name in history. One of the universities he helped create was the University of Chicago. This generous support turned it into one of the world's leading educational institutions, and Rockefeller's name became a symbol of intellectual progress. John paid special attention to medicine. He donated millions to disease research and the fight against parasites. Interestingly, this was due to his personal experience. In his youth, Rockefeller suffered from tropical parasites that could seriously undermine his health. Thanks to his support, important discoveries were made in the fight against these diseases, saving millions of lives. But even here, Rockefeller controlled everything. All the grants that his foundation gave out were accompanied by strict conditions. For example, scientists had to share their discoveries with certain institutions associated with Rockefeller's name. Rockefeller never engaged in random donations. If he supported a project, it was always part of his long-term strategy. One of his favorite tricks was to donate money so that the public would think of him as a kind and generous person. As a result, by the end of his life, he was not only the richest, but also one of the most respected men of his time. How did the world's richest man live at the end of his life? Surprisingly, John Rockefeller, who was used to the endless struggle for power and money, in his last years sought not fame, but peace. However, even in a quiet old age, he remained an unusual personality, which to the very end surprised those around him. Rockefeller lived to 97 years, an incredible age even for modern times, and even more so for the late 19th, early 20th century. How did he manage it? John believed that health is the most important wealth. He hired the best doctors from all over the world and paid them huge sums of money to keep an eye on his condition. He was also strict about his lifestyle. Every morning began with light exercises, and his diet was as simple as possible, a minimum of meat, more vegetables, and no excesses. Rockefeller said, "Business taught me to manage money, and old age to manage the body." Once he even organized a private medical conference to learn the latest advances in medicine. His interest in health was so great that he funded research on drugs he used himself. In his later years, Rockefeller found a new hobby: gardening. On his estates, he grew roses, pruned trees, and tended to vegetable gardens. This process helped him to calm down and distract himself from the stress that had haunted him all his life. It is said that he could sit on a bench for hours watching the plants. He enjoyed seeing something grow because of his care. This hobby became a kind of meditation for him. Even in his old age, he continued to act in the habit of a businessman, planning, recording, and comparing the results of the harvest. John Rockefeller left a huge legacy. His name is associated not only with oil but also with charity, medicine, and education. He founded several universities, supported scientific research, and many of his projects are still working today.